Well, today on Frankie Say, my guest is the beautiful, amazing. So, can I say Tony Cameron?
Please do.
Does anyone call you Anthony?
Relatively talented.
Relatively. I already know you're relatively talented. Now, I know that you and I, so you're an attorney down below in the basement or?
My office is right here, 535 Main.
Right below here?
Right here, right below here.
And so you've been practicing law for how long?
About 52 years.
Oh my goodness. That's fantastic. Do you remember how we met and then how we met in real life? So I'll refresh your memory. We met, so this sounds so funny to like any of the greatest generation and the boomers. When you say we met online, it sounds like it might be something else.
Dating site.
Yeah, it's like, yeah. So, I mean, obviously everyone who knows you and I knows that, you know, what that means. And, but we met kind of like, we would like exchange opinions online on social media. And I still think this. I think that you are one of the sharpest swords in the entire area in terms of your wit and your intellect. And I always wanted to meet you. And then we were at an event somewhere. And my wife and I, Rachel, we met you in real life. This is a few years ago. We were at where were we? We were either at Dream Big or we were at a wedding or we were at a Q&A extravaganza. I don't know where it was. Do you have any?
It was a wedding. I don't remember whose, but it was a wedding.
Okay, but we were out and about at the ambiance.
Yeah.
And then I saw you for the very first time, and then I was so excited. I turned to my wife, I go, "That's Tony Cameron." And she's like, "Okay." I go, "You know, the guy that like I talk with on Facebook that like is so smart and always outclasses me," which no offense is not really hard to do. And like just you're so witty and you are so quick. So are you like this all the time?
Gosh, no. Everybody has to have decompression time now. You got to hear my version of how we meet.
Please.
It's different.
Okay.
I knew you through the two estimable women in your life, approximately 2018, 19, before COVID.
Okay.
My wife and I were at a wedding. The reception was at the, whatever they call the downtown hotel that used to be the Holiday Inn these days.
Yeah.
Right by the Oakley Lindsay Center. And your mother and stepfather and my wife and I ended up at a four-top table together.
Okay.
And my wife and your mom knew each other already. I had never met your mom, as far as I recall. So I'm talking to your mom and stepfather, and she, of course, is talking about you. My conversational style is real simple. I ask questions of the person I meet, and they give me answers. And then they think I'm a good conversationalist when I'm actually getting them to do all the talking. But she's talking about you, and she's talking about very tenderly telling the story of how you arrived at your double last name, which I thought, okay, I know who that guy is. I've seen him around. But that's pretty deep and pretty sensitive, and I got to get to know this guy better. And then, of course, being a busy trial lawyer, I'd do nothing in that regard. So a couple of years later, I'm loose on my times here, but I think it's early 2020 before the COVID shutdown. I'm at a party. It's at the Eagles, and I'm sitting with my wife and a couple of other people and a young woman friend, and turns out the young woman friend is a friend of your wife, Rachel's. Rachel comes and sits down with us. You're not there. She expressly said you're not there. And
okay. Yes.
The friend of Rachel's left. The other people at the table left. And it was just my wife and me and Rachel. And my recollection of it is that we talked for an hour. I have no recollection of what we talked about. But again, I figured, all right, if this estimable woman liked this guy enough to marry him, I got to get to know him better because you have two dynamic, wonderful women in your life.
Oh, thank you.
So then I actually met you at the event you talked about, and here we are on a podcast together.
Yeah. And I hope I didn't come off too excitable. I was very excited to meet you because I do remember that time when Rachel came home and she's like, yeah, so I met a guy named Tony Cameron. And I'm like, and I'm not a jealous husband. And I think I said, was he flirting with you? Like, who's, and she's like, no, Tony Cameron. And then she explained who you were. I'm like, oh my gosh, yes. Yeah. And then I don't know if I may have sent you a text because I had your cell phone number for some reason. And I don't really remember all the details, but good to have you.
I know why you have my cell phone.
Why?
Because there was something untoward happening at one of your properties on a weekend. And I reached out to you and asked you to call me. I think I used Facebook Messenger or something, and asked you to call me and gave you my cell phone number. That's why you have it.
Got it. Yeah. And then
that's like 4 years ago.
Was it? Okay.
So now we're besties.
Yeah. Oh, we're besties. Did I take care of it?
Yeah.
Did I? Okay,
Yeah.
good. To be honest, it's not so much that my memory is depreciating a little bit, which I do think it is. And there's something weird about the brain. My question is there like a clock deep in the cerebellum or somewhere in the midbrain or in the lizard brain where as you get older, the perception of time shifts? I'm a little concerned about this, about how time is going, from my perspective, is going by faster now. I'm 47, and I remember, being a child, when you tell one of your kids or a young person that dinner isn't for another hour, that's an eternity.
It's an eternity.
It's an eternity. I mean, 10 minutes. If you tell the child to sit in the corner for 5 minutes, and you say, and if you don't sit there, you don't be quiet, I'm going to make it 10. And like the amount of dread you can see kind of permeating from them. But as an adult in my 40s, I'm a little alarmed that the baby of our family, Press, she turned 5 yesterday. I'm alarmed by this because I don't understand how time goes by faster as you get older. It's a weird phenomenon as the way I perceive it.
Just wait. I'm a few semesters older than you. Just wait, it gets weirder.
It does it?
Because sometimes it seems to speed up, like it's utterly out of control. And sometimes relating an event to another event, you think it happened like 2 years apart and it was 12 years apart. It separating things in context, one from the other, in terms of time. I just put it up to, eventually you have so much stuff on your hard drive, it takes longer to index it.
Yeah, and then sometimes you have to defragment that hard drive because everything kind of gets scattered. You got to kind of pull it back together.
And we all do that differently. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, defragment's actually a nice word. I use decompress, but everybody has to have something that they do that they're not worrying about the other things in their life.
Do you? Well, I know you wanted to talk about the estimable women in my life. You used that term in a text to me earlier, and you use that word again. Sometimes you use words that I have to look up, just so you know. Sometimes you'll so if anybody listening thinks it's weird that we're talking about like being on Facebook, the thing is so you can say on one hand that Facebook is the devil. Okay, sure, I agree with that. Some people can say social media is a bad thing. Okay, yeah. I mean, I am personally guilty of jumping into the fray on Facebook for better or for worse, and I don't think I have a 100% track record. I think I'm wrong sometimes, and usually it's days, weeks, months afterward where I figure out that I'm wrong on something. It's usually not in the moment. But what do you think about, I heard this, and I don't apply this to you at all because I have so much respect for you, and you're so good. You're always teaching somebody in a with humility, though. You don't give off this persona or this edge to where you think you're better than anybody. It's quite the opposite. It's a humble, unique perspective that probably is so insightful that somebody who read it had an aha moment. I think that's the way that you write on socials. And the reason why I bring it up is because my father, he wouldn't be caught dead on like Facebook. And there's a lot of, can I say the word boomers? Is that a pejorative? That's not a pejorative, is it?
No.
Boomers? So I'm X. And then there's, all the different generations. I feel like the older generations well above me would not dare enter into the fray. They either don't know how to use a computer or they're too good for it, or they're too much of a man. And then the reason why I'm saying that is I think you're a good man. I hope to be a good man someday, but when you are on socials, whenever I see whatever it is that you write, I don't pay a lot of attention to my news feed, but if it says Tony Cameron commented on this, I'm 100% going to click on that, because you're going to write something that I'm like, oh, there's Tony being smart again, like intelligent in such a positive way. Why do you think that the older generations just don't get on Facebook after we accuse the young people of not going on Facebook? They use Snapchat and Instagram. They use all of these new social media devices and apps. And we say, well, the reason why all the young people left Facebook is because grandma's on there now. But
yeah, that's the talk. Yes, it's the old person social medium.
Yeah, but
okay.
Okay. But then it's you don't see a lot of. Do you know what SHIT posting is? I don't want to say the word.
Yeah.
SHIT posting.
Kind of, yeah.
I think I've been guilty of it before, but it's mostly just people they're posting and posting and posting, and they're just like they're just sharing. It's like, okay, have you ever seen anybody on social media where they just, and by the way, if you do this, I'm not accusing you of doing it. I'm saying just generally speaking, they'll share a lot of things. Like if my mother's watching this, my mom watches like maybe a quarter of my pods. And Mom, if you're listening, I'm not talking about you, my darling mother, but like, I'm sorry, shit posting is when you're going through your news feed and you're like, oh, that's cute, share. Oh yeah, that's how I feel about politics too, share. Oh, that's so deep, share. And then there's the other kind of that kind of posting, SHIT posting, where they're just expelling just over and over and over. So do you have anybody in your news feed that does that without naming names?
Yeah. And I particularly, I don't care for somebody whose expression is always memes, especially current memes. Now you'll notice on my feed, I'll quote Camus or Nietzsche, but I don't really consider that a meme. That's wisdom from the ages that I'm trying to pass down, and I think it's topical.
That's different.
I think it is.
That's not right. I think, like Nietzsche, you know what my favorite Nietzsche quote is? Nietzsche said that God is dead. And you know what God said? Nietzsche's dead.
God got the last guess, didn't he?
Yeah. But, if someone posts something by Rumi or Socrates or some Platonic quote, those are just quick little snapshots that somebody made that meme. But generally, like a really good meme is something that has maybe some sarcasm in it, maybe some humor. There's a kernel of truth in there. It's meant to evoke. Maybe it's a cartoon, and there's some dialogue like before and afters. Or on Twitter, there's something called Defiant L's.
Yes.
Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah.
Or like Being Libertarian has a lot of really good memes where it's a snapshot of something. It's not just a quote from a historic person that's meant to be thought-provoking. It's like a gotcha. It's like, boom. Like here is like in the Overton window. Here's what the old Overton window was. Here's what the new Overton window is. We're going to smash these together with some kind of exclamation. And you're like, ah. And it's so good and so funny that you want to share it with everybody.
I get that.
There's a lot of that stuff.
If I do that once a year, it'd be a lot. It would really have to be critical mass for me. I try to post either original material or something that's time tested. You initiate. And don't want to turn this into a Facebook circle, but we could start knitting too. But when you initiate a post, it's thought provoking, frequently misunderstood, I believe.
Oh,
and your contribution is good if people just apply a little thought to it.
Well, thanks. Do you think there's an art to posting on social media?
I think there's an art to replying and there's an art to initiating posting, and they're actually different skills, I believe.
I agree.
You talked about old people don't know how to use a computer, and that's why they're not on. This is just an ironic thing about me. We used to do these, what are called regional continuing legal education, and I always taught the technology piece. And it occurred to me one day, I'm right in the middle of my presentation, and it occurred to me, you're up here teaching people half your age about technology. You must be doing something to keep up. And I do. I spend a lot of my own money trying to understand how the technology works.
How much of your time do you spend trying to figure out how the world works?
I wish I had more. I have a busy practice, and I'm very grateful for that busy practice. But I was active in politics for a good portion of my life, and so I thought about how both the economy and the government of various places work. I was in the intelligence community when I was in the military, and that was instructive. You couldn't do that and not think about what the forces are that move the earth.
Have you ever been on a pod where you described kind of the autobiographical account, the narrative, the timeline, the chronologicals of your experiences? Have you ever gotten
No.
the chance to sit down? I mean, I know we're behind lights and camera, but we can ignore all this and just have a one-on-one, because I think we would have done this at our next wedding.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I'm completely comfortable doing that. Well,
Because I do have a question. I'd like
Go
to
ahead.
just kind of give a thumbnail sketch, so an hour podcast with Tony Cameron, we're not going to get, if you're so deep that we're not going to get past your formative years if we don't move on to like something. Because what I'm going to do is I want to hear a little bit about where you were born, where you grew up, and how you ended up here or in the same place. If you're from Quincy, you're still here, fantastic. If you came from somewhere else, you came here, great. Whatever your story is, fantastic, because you're sitting here in front of me and I know you're fantastic. But I kind of want to know that, and I kind of want to know, I've got some questions after that. So where are you from?
I was born in Evanston, Illinois, which is in Cook County. Mm-hmm. I grew up and graduated from high school in Lake County. Went to Barrington, Illinois High School, which is today the best funded school system in the state. When I went there, it was the second best funded school system in the state. 100% of our high school graduates went on to college. My first 2 years of college were review. It was a really good school.
So I'm from Algonquin.
I didn't know that.
I'm from Algonquin. I lived off of Highland Avenue. Do you know where Hager's Bend?
Sure, absolutely.
Well, so Walter Payton used to race down Highland Avenue in during Super Bowl shuffle times when the Bears won the Super Bowl. And my babysitter and Jarrett Payton's babysitter was the same babysitter. So I got to see, I never really talked to Walter Payton, but when you say Barrington, I know that I have a snapshot of what Barrington looks like. Very beautiful place. I cannot afford to live there. That is an unbelievable area of the world. And I don't know if Quincyans know how Barrington is. They may have heard of Barrington or Barrington Hills. You know, then you got Fox River Grove and Cary, which is not anything like Barrington and Barrington Hills.
Correct.
And that's McHenry County, is it not?
You get to Cary, you get into McHenry County.
Okay. What county?
Some of Grove is still in Lake County.
Okay.
It cuts off.
So Barrington is in Lake County? There's a cutoff there.
The high school is on the north side of Main Street, and Main Street is County Line Road.
Got it.
So if you're going west, to your left is Cook County, to your right is Lake County.
Got it.
So,
yeah, I forgot about County Line Road, because County Line Road is a big stretch. All the way across to.
Used to be 65 mile an hour speed limit. Now it's 45 because it's still 2-lane road and there's no shoulder.
And it's just stoplight after stoplight now.
Oh,
too.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot. That's not where you want to go. You want to jump on, if you want to find your way to 90.
Right. If you're going generally east and west, even if it takes you too far north, you still want to be on 90. You're right.
Yeah, I don't want to lose the Quincy crowd by talking about Chicago suburbs
geography,
too much.
Yeah.
But you and I could do that. So all right. So you went to Barrington High School.
I went to Western Illinois University for 1 year. Met the woman of my dreams. Figured nothing better than that was going to happen to me at Western, so I did the most counterintuitive thing in the world, transferred to University of Illinois, and got my undergraduate degree at University of Illinois. Then I did 4 years in the Air Force, and then I went to law school at University of Iowa, except the Air Force decided, let me explain this first. When you get out, at that time, when you got out of the military, you're in what's called Ready Reserve for 2 years. I did 4 years of active duty. You're on Ready Reserve. Ready Reserve means the women and children go before you do. It means you're in no danger of being recalled.
Okay.
Until you aren't. And
Okay.
I started law school and I got recalled.
Wow.
And
So what
I
happened?
remember the phone call like it was yesterday. My daughter was to be born in January. I got the call in December. And they said, you're being recalled. And I thought, oh my God, this is a disaster. I'm just ready to take finals my freshman year in law school. My daughter's about to be born. This is a disaster. It turned out, the guy said, you just need to plan the kind of things you used to do. You don't even need to wear a uniform. Just show up at this location in Virginia, and we'll work with you on your weekends, 3-day weekends and holidays. And it turned out to be the coolest job you could have and still be able to go to law school. So I got recalled, never once put a uniform on, did the work, got discharged again about a year later, and finished law school. Moved to the state of, I took a hiatus at Texas Tech University to do a short teaching job at the university there. I mean, I didn't even look for a home. I didn't move my family. I just did that because they needed it.
Okay.
Then I moved to Northwest Arkansas, and I worked for a company there. But I decided I wanted to take the Arkansas bar. And when I took the Arkansas bar, there was this preparation class, commercial preparation class for taking the bar. And I'm really stretching this out now, but there's this big, tall, goofy guy with curly hair, and for some reason we hit it off just right. And this is in a big bank building. It's like 40 stories high. On the 35th floor, there's this enormous putting green. And it's like 105 degrees in Little Rock in July. And we're basically playing contact hockey on this putting green and just having a ball, laughing it up. And of course, we're so sweaty when we get back to the auditorium for the class, nobody there would sit next to us because we were so stinky. So it was just the two of us, and we did this every break for 2 or 3 years. His name was Bill Clinton.
The Bill Clinton?
Yeah, and William
my
Jefferson
gosh.
Clinton.
Oh my gosh.
And
Arkansas.
We stayed, we stayed friends a long time, several times while I was running for president. Still hear from him occasionally, not as often. And that was when he was a guy really know. We actually started a business together and then aborted it when he ran for Congress. And
You guys are friends.
we were tight. Saw each other a lot. Played
How's
golf
he,
together.
do you have any idea how he's doing now?
His second heart surgery was just a terrific success. The first one wasn't so good. This is good podcast material. Right after the first surgery, which was in late August, I believe, of whatever year it was, usually he calls me. His aide, his post-presidential aide is Raul. And he has just like you, has my cell phone number, and not exactly like him. And I hear Raul's voice, and I know it now. He said, "Will you hold for the president?" What are you going to say? Oh, hell no, I'm not holding for president of the United States. But I did get a little spunky with him on this particular September. I was on my way to give a speech someplace. I don't remember where. And Raul says, "Will you hold for the president?" I said, "Sure, Raul." And he gets on, and, "Hi, Tony." And I said, "Mr. President, I saw you on television the other night. You look like shit." And he just cracked up. This was in his post-presidency.
I tend to like if there's a president I like or dislike, whatever. Everybody's got their opinion, but I like the idea of having a president that you're kind of proud of. I remember when the very first president that I remember was Reagan. So I was born during Ford, and the next day Carter got inaugurated. Mm-hmm. So I pretty much just said my birthday, January 19th of 77, which I probably shouldn't say that in case there's any people out there trying to get some information on me. But hi to the phone scammer guy, prank caller who keeps on calling me at midnight every night. There's somebody that's doing that right now.
Oh.
And so that's another thing. But hi, if you're listening, this is your 5 seconds of fandom here. So
you ever watch Scammer Revenge on YouTube?
No, what's that?
I wouldn't do it regularly, but about once a year I'll watch it. The guy has to have been in the intelligence community. He's a hacker, and he can do voices.
I'll check that out.
And he just blows scammers up. It's funny.
No, I'll have to check that out. This idea. So my point here is I like Clinton now. Like when he was president, I was okay with him. And I didn't have any strong dislike. I remember my mother being furious with the Monica Lewinsky thing. She was so mad because she says this is how a president should be, and this is how a president should act. I go, yeah, Mom, but you like JFK. Like you gotta just be consistent here. And I like the idea of if I was cognizant of what Carter was doing at the time, I might not have liked Carter. But now when I see Jimmy Carter, President Carter, when I see pictures of him or videos of him, I like him. It's weird how even Obama. I like Obama, President Obama. I like him more now than I did when he was president. And it's almost most of the presidents, I feel like I like them more. The ones that I didn't care for as much when they were president, I like them more. Is that because does history, what happens to a person when they like the presidents more after they're gone?
I have a theory about that. I don't think it's what happens to you. I think it's what happens to them. Because they get to pick the stuff they get to work on in their post-presidency. So they do what lights their fire. When are people at their best? When they're doing what lights their fire.
Okay.
So I think that you're seeing people in an environment that nurtures their better selves, their better angels, to use a Lincoln phrase. And I think I feel the same way. I know slightly President Obama. I knew him before he ran. I knew him when he was in the State House. Actually played pool with him a couple of times.
Okay.
But I didn't love his presidency. But now you say, oh man, I'd like to have coffee with that guy. You can't but not like the guy.
I don't know if I liked Reagan or President Obama more in terms of their oratorship. I think I was saying it at one point in time. I was telling my father that I thought that President Obama is probably the greatest orator of my lifetime. He goes, "What about Reagan?" I go, yes, President Reagan and President Obama, like those two. I thought President Clinton was a very good speaker, but I think was it the 2004 DNC where he was a junior senator from Illinois at the time when Obama gave a speech. It was an electric speech. It was unbelievable.
It was a fantastic patriotic speech.
It was unbelievable.
Yes.
And so I'll listen to it once in a while, but I think it's one of the greatest speeches I've ever heard. And so obviously, without getting into political partisanship of who we want to be president and who we don't, it's weird. I don't
taking
really
your statement exactly for that. Why do we like post-presidents better than presidents? And I think it's because they're doing the stuff they want to do.
Well, we're going to get back to your biography here in a minute, but did you recently see the picture of President Carter, from last week?
Yeah, it looked bad.
He's in the wheelchair, and his mouth is agape, and he's just kind of staring up, and he's there for a Harris Walz rally or he's in support of them, but he doesn't look like he should have been outside. And it might have been his. Is he 100 years old?
I think it's when he went to vote early. I think that's what the picture was.
Okay, yes.
And I've had the misfortune, because I've lived a number of semesters, to have sat with people in hospice and occasionally watched one or two expire. That's what I saw in that picture, and it made me sad, and yet it made me kind of neat that he was spunky enough to hold on long enough to vote.
Well, it's almost like his personality, and I think he's 100.
He's 100.
Yeah. So somebody probably said, Mr. President, we probably should wheel you out here like this. There'll be lots of like photos being taken. He probably said, I don't care.
Yeah.
I mean, he's the kind of personality. But what was he, a peanut farmer from Georgia?
Yeah.
Just such a nice, such a nice, caring man. The last 20, 30 years of my life I've heard people say, well, Carter wasn't good for this, and like the gas wars, and all of these things that people didn't like about the presidency. But in my life, as a 47-year-old person, whereas the next day after I was born, that man became president.
Yes. What a clock.
From my perspective, President Carter is a badass. So that's just my take on it.
I lived right here in farming country from 1978 to early 82 during the stagflation. You can't describe what that was like. Close friend of mine ran one of the local small town banks back when there were actual local small town banks. And he made loans to these guys for seed all the time, and they paid him when they could, and everything was fine. All of a sudden, during the stagflation, the banking examiners came with this note's been open too long. You got to do something. We're going to have to declare your bank insolvent. And all of a sudden, little banks started merging with big banks, and there were no more locally owned little banks. All of that happened while Carter was, that rock began rolling down the hill while Carter was president. I suspect it would have happened no matter who was president. There was a lot of forces at work that an American president could control. And I think he still would have won the 1980 election if it wasn't for the Iranian hostages.
Yeah. I think that's a possibility. That stagflation, those interest rates started to creep. I'm trying to think of who was it Volper or Faulkner? Who was the guy? I mean, during Reagan, as those interest rates began to really climb, mortgages, even through 89, this is like when the Berlin Wall was falling down.
Yep.
The mortgages, I remember my parents, we moved from Algonquin, and when my parents signed the note in around March of 89, the interest rate in their
painful.
The interest rate was over 14%. I think people, and this is for like all of like the Zoomers and some of the millennials, for them to kind of pay attention to these interest rates, where from their perspective, interest rates have doubled, which is factual.
Yes.
Doubled from where they were.
From 2 3/4.
From 2 3/4 to 6.5. So yes, they've doubled or more than doubled. But from a historical point of view, interest rates are historically low today, lower than 14%. My parents had a 14.2% mortgage in 1989. They bought an old, one of those old homes, on the, in the German historic district area,
yeah.
Not far from here, and that's really rough. So looking at homes right now that are, when you buy a home, it's still, housing prices have skyrocketed, and there's lots of this inflation, and it's very difficult for people to buy homes.
The whole supply-demand thing's out of kilter.
It's in pretty bad shape, actually, with all of that, but the interest rates are not 14%, or the mortgage rates, I shouldn't say. I should say are not 14%. They're 6 or 7, which is, it's not 3, but it's not 14.
Compared to 2019, it's terrible.
Terrible.
Compared to 1988, it's nirvana.
My brother sometimes says, he goes, the worst thing that anybody has been through, that's the worst thing they've ever been through. So from their perspective, it's bad. It goes back to the Zoomers. They look at some of their parents got to refi at 2.5% for a 15-year. So they step out of the house. Maybe they're done with college or whatever. They're looking to buy a home. Maybe they're 23, 24, 25 years old.
Thinking they're going to get the same deal.
And they're not getting the same deal.
No.
So the housing prices have tripled and the interest rates have doubled. They don't think that's fair.
And the base price has gone up because the supply of fungible homes is up.
What do you think is going to happen when the boomers. So the boomers, that's a pretty big population. We're in some kind of like weird population spiral, like death spiral. I don't know if you follow the fertility rate.
The 0.9 to 1.5 thing, it's a real thing.
Well, what's going to happen? I mean, I make this joke about all of these big, beautiful, mansions in Quincy, these big, huge old homes built in the late 1800s. How many of them are going to come up available? I tell the millennials and the Zoomers, hang tight. Hang tight. Listen, when these boomers start, and it's not funny because, I don't know what generation you're in, Tony, but
everybody has a body clock. That's okay.
Just be patient. It's like Oprah said, those people just have to die. That's how you cure racism.
That's cold but true.
It's so terrible. So back to your life. You're hanging out with Bill Clinton. You're in Arkansas. What happens next?
Well, I still have a day job, but somebody has to teach his constitutional law class because he's running for Congress. So for whatever year it was, second semester, I do my day job, and I work for a corporation down there as their corporation counsel, and then I taught his constitutional law class while he roamed northern Arkansas, and northern is it's a loose term because his district was impossible to travel, so he was gone all the time. So I taught his con law class that semester, and then I realized that I was still a Yankee at heart, and I moved back to Illinois.
Okay. Your shenanigans with Clinton weren't enough to keep you there?
No, but we stayed in touch. We stayed in touch.
So you moved back to Illinois?
Yeah, I moved back to
Where?
Illinois. I moved to Springfield originally, worked for the Attorney General of Illinois, separated from the Attorney General. My choice, my wife is from here, but I wasn't.
Is that why you came to
Quincy? I wanted
Quincy?
to come here, not because she was really happy in Springfield. She didn't really want to come here, even though her parents were here. But it turned out to be a blessed move for both of us. Our daughter got to spend more time with her grandparents, and there wasn't that much time left, as it turned out. And I've always loved it here, And so when I had the chance, I came back and never broke my connection with the Attorney General. I was a Special Assistant Attorney General, part-time, from 1975 to 2009, I think it was, when I finally resigned. Always did something for the Attorney General. Environmental, did some appellate work, even did some admiralty law, which is a really weird law. But I was a special assistant to every elected Attorney General from 1972 until 2009 when I quit.
And so you and I were talking, we were corresponding earlier about the value of being a civil servant. And how do you incorporate that into, like, in your past and your past work, and kind of what's your general feel? You said that you have a passion about,
civil service work. Some of it's from my work in the intelligence community when I was in the military, and then when I was called back. There's somebody at a desk. I'll just use this as an example. There was a situation where the problem we were working on, we literally needed to know whether Ukraine, which was then part of the USSR, was going to be self-sustaining enough to field its part of a certain mission. Because the way the USSR worked is all the money was centralized, but everybody had to make their contribution.
Okay.
And so we needed to know specifically about the wheat crop in the Ukraine. There was some lady, I don't remember her name, and I wouldn't say it if I did remember it, who had a bachelor's degree in agriculture and a master's degree from Iowa State University in agricultural economics. And she was able to tell us almost to the bushel what kind of season the Ukraine was going to have. She was a civil servant. She was protected by civil service. She was an expert on international agricultural economics.
Goodness.
And maybe you don't need her but 3 times a year, but when you need her badly.
Talk about a niche.
Yeah, that's a hyper niche. Now,
it is.
Tax return examiners. Okay, people file tax returns. They're facially correct. They don't have any math errors on them, but they don't match up with their 1099s. Okay. A computer still, even with AI and supercooling, can't catch all those, but a human can. That person has to be free of political influence. They have to be protected. What some people call, I don't want to get into partisan politics here, but what some people call the deep state is actually the professional support system that's there for whoever it is that comes into office to control the handles of government.
Do you object to the term administrative state?
Yeah, I do, because it's used as a more polite way to say deep state. It still has a conspiratorial overtone. I think most civil servants are just that. They give up some political and expressive freedoms in order to serve all of us for a fair GS pay. And the same thing's true in the state of Illinois. There are people I'll just use the EPA because I'm quite familiar with it. There are people in the Illinois EPA that are doing way too many tasks because they've shrunk their budget so much to try and keep the waters of the state of Illinois from becoming any more polluted than they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting. The environmental attorneys, I hope this doesn't sound partisan, but like take like a guy like Bobby Kennedy Jr. who seems to care about the environment. I believe he does. I don't think he's a very fake person. I hope he's not. I don't believe anything I see or hear or read in the news anymore. Like in terms of the corporate legacy media.
We got to come back to that.
National. Well, yeah. Well, come back to this? What the corporate legacy?
The corporate legacy media. But finish your thought.
Yeah. What I was going to say was, when you talk about civil servants and like the quote unquote deep state or conspiratorial things, as I was younger, conspiracy theory, I heard, I don't know if this is true, but the term conspiracy theory I think was coined by the CIA. That's my impression. I don't know that for a fact. By the way, I don't feel like I know anything for a fact. You know how they talk about death and taxes? I don't even know if those are real. I don't know if everything is a social construct. I don't know if we're living in a simulation or what's going on, but I feel like I've got a good handle on it. But also maybe the second someone says that they have a good handle on it, that's evidence to me that they definitely don't have a good handle on what's going on. So, but environmental attorneys and the administrative aspects and the civil servants and the quote unquote, whatever the deep state is, I'm fascinated by their humanity. And I think there are pros and cons to their humanity. I wonder if they're still subject to the corporate legacy media's stranglehold on what the truth is at any given moment in time. I wrestle with this. I don't know. So to kind of translate what I'm saying here is the term deep state, as soon as you say deep state, as soon as I say that, I can hear the words coming out of my mouth. And I can see half of the country like, yeah, deep state. Like, that's bad. The other half is like, wait a second, that doesn't even exist. Does it exist?
Well, administrative arm of the government certainly exists. And it may, and I'll concede this because I've made this argument in court before, there are times when it has too much rulemaking power. I'll concede that in a heartbeat. But when you need that agricultural expert, when you need that tax reviewer, they have to be free of political influence, and they have to know that their employment's going to go on and that it's vital. I don't think they get ratified enough as individuals.
Yeah. So as somebody who I don't get to live in that world, so this is a perfect opportunity for me to ask you, how in the world are they able, or can they be expected to be politically free, or nonpartisan or independent and think, like, for example, like we could take any topic, and I don't want to go into one or the other, but I'll just throw out, if you're talking about immigration, if they are for or against immigration, like personally, I'm for immigration and probably against illegal immigration.
You better be, because we were just talking about the 0.9 as opposed to the 1.5.
For immigration. I was really happy that my great-grandparents came here, you know? So, or if you're talking about anything, if you're talking about the debt, some people don't really think the debt is very important. Some people do. If some people think that, you brought up Ukraine. Some people think that some of those bureaucrats or those civil servants believe we should keep the train moving to help Ukraine because this is in our nation's best interest. How are the civil servants expected to behave and kind of make decisions in a truly independent fashion?
It's hard, and they of course have opinions outside of work, and there's a fine line between making a financial contribution, which they can't do under the Hatch Act, and saying at book club that they prefer X candidate over Y candidate, which they probably can do. So I mean, they have a roadmap. You just lit up something for me, and
Okay.
I don't know if I can circle back to it or not. But you were talking about what we know is true, which opens up the whole area of epistemology, which is over my head. But
Yeah.
having said that, there are certain facts that are objective. You can insist all you want that water freezes at 40 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's still going to be liquid. You can believe that with all your heart. And it's not true. The objective fact is, all things considered, under almost every circumstance, water is going to begin to freeze at 32 degrees and not 40 degrees.
Until you get the super smart scientific bureaucrat that will say, actually, it can at certain atmospheric pressures.
Okay, fair enough.
Which, by the way, I'm not challenging you. I'm saying
no.
You said something that is like a common sense. We all know that at normal nominal atmospheric pressures, water does. But 2 + 2 = 4. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm not saying a fact is irrefutable, but it's objective as opposed to opinion, which leads me back, and you brought up the legacy media, and I think people need to understand what they're watching. Mm-hmm. I've just used television right now. The news is a plane crashed in the swamp area of Argentina, and there were 90 people on board. That's the news. Okay. Then if you bring a guest on and he's an expert in airline safety and he speculates about what happened, that's commentary.
Yeah.
So if you understand, if you're watching CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, News Nation, Newsmax, you're not watching the news. You're watching commentary. That's the editorial page, all the way through. Okay, I have a friend who insists that the program at 4:30 on Fox News is actually hard news, and I've watched it and I disagree with him. I think it's commentary. I think it's all the editorial page. And there was a time, maybe before your time, I don't know. There was a time when CNN had what they called Around the World in 30 Minutes. And
I remember that.
That was news. That
Yes.
was, this happened. Those were, and I'm not, again, I'm talking about objective facts, not irrefutable facts, but they're objective. They're things.
So
that's what they would present.
Is there any corporate legacy media, like on the national level, that routinely gives hard news?
I think for, let me do the math, there'd be 22 minutes of actual programming in the 30-minute news that comes on at 5:30 on all three of the main channels. Okay.
Yeah.
They're 22 minutes. I'd say 20 of those are hard news. They may say so and so said X, which is true, but it's repeating an opinion. If they bring Henry Kissinger on to talk about Gaza, for example, they're rebarfing an opinion. But by and large, they're telling you this plane crashed there. There was a school shooting, which is almost another school shooting. We'll move on with that. But they're giving you, at least for the most part, objective information.
Which brand?
All three of them.
All of them?
Yeah. I
3? Okay.
Yeah. Now, Is there bias in
What are the
selecting
what are the three?
what stories they run? Of course there is. If it bleeds, it leads.
I'm taking out Reuters. I'm kind of taking the AP out of this for a second. What are the three? What are there's the big three. Is it CNN, MSNBC, Fox?
No,
Or
I think
who are
those
the three?
those are all the editorial page. Every one of them's the editorial page.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I'm talking about the true legacy: ABC, NBC, CBS at 5:30 our time.
Okay.
I think you get out of the 22 minutes of actual programming, you get 20 minutes of objective news.
Okay.
Is that enough to educate somebody to learn how the world is working? Heck no.
Well, it's so interesting because you get. So I'm going to kind of. I want to be careful how I say it, but I'll just make fun of some of the people who they're really quick to DVR the 5 on Fox.
Okay.
But they're not going to DVR these 22 minutes of hard news for ABC because they're not concerned. And I'm painting the picture of people close to me. They're not going to, they're not interested in what the news is. They're interested in the antics of Greg Gutfeld, whom I'll tell you right now, I got a soft spot for Gutfeld because he's kind of a comedic genius. And he's a libertarian, and
he's performative.
He's performative.
And you like performative.
I do.
Who doesn't?
But then there's this also idea of the right thinking brain versus the left thinking brain, and I do believe there is a wiring difference in the two brains. When you're watching the hard news, I believe that there's a certain kind of a person that's going to DVR. Let's say, you said 5:30 our time.
Yes.
I do not, and I'm really kind of embarrassed to say this, and I hope this doesn't ruin my reputation any further than it's already been ruined. But
go for it.
But I don't watch that 5:30 segment of the hard news. I think it's because I'm coaching kids' sports.
It's because you have a life.
Well, yeah, but what kind of life is it if I'm never getting the hard news from one of these three sources? So what I'm saying is, I also don't have a DVR player. I'm not DVRing the 5, which I would love to watch the 5, but chances are something tells me that once you've seen the 5 20 times, you're good. You always know what they're going to say.
You know what the script is.
I know what the script is every time I go, watch it. But and I'm just mentioning the 5 because it's something that my parents love. I think my parents DVR the 5. I'm going to challenge my parents to start DVRing the 22 minutes of hard news at 5:30 and see what they say. But although my Walt and Diane, super smart people, super awesome. Yeah. Everybody loves them because they're nice to everybody, and they're truly a gift.
Great people.
But they probably need to start watching the hard news, especially Diane if you're listening. So.
Well, but see.
Yeah.
That's a self-selection process too. They're there because they want to be. However, they arrive there. I get that.
Do you think there is a wiring difference between? So, if you had to oversimplify, if we had to cut the country proverbially, how do you say that word?
Proverbially.
Yeah.
You got me doing
it.
Proverbially.
Yeah. The proverbial. If you cut the country in half, and if we want to oversimplify and say half of the Americans are like this and half of the Americans are like that, there's, assuming the election is still going to go on as planned in a couple weeks, not too far away, we're less than 2 weeks away. Do you think that people are wired differently? Do you think it's they join the club on one side or the other? Either their parents and grandparents were always wired that way, so that's the way they're wired, and then you got some Americans who they grew up a certain way, but they see their parents are just jerks. They're like, you know what? I don't want to be like them. So they wire themselves the other way.
And probably overwire.
Yeah. But do you think it's a wiring issue, or do you think or am I simplifying it too much? Is it just everybody's different? Everybody's got their own experiences? Because it comes down to some people in Quincy, I'm not going to name names, but they'll say things like, if this person wants this candidate to win, they're immoral. They're unethical. The supporters of that person, because this goes all the way down to when we're talking about civil servants trying to stay independent, try to make their decisions. Because really wrestle, and I'll tell you again, I wrestle with this idea that civil servants are able to, from the base level desk jobs all the way up to the director of the FBI, because I don't think those are elected positions. They're all appointed. And then those bureaucrats, the assistant to the FBI, how does that person, the assistant, like the top 20 people up at the top of the CIA, are they civil servants? Are they able to stay neutral?
Probably 17 of those 20 are protected civil servants.
Right. And how are they able to, it goes back to this, how are they able to, I'm sure they're talking to each other, but they all have their own perspective of the world and how they should act in accordance with their jobs and to protect the United States.
They actually operate within a discipline, though, and their job is to provide information. At the analysis level, they literally try to counter each other out. If they've got somebody who, just for an example, they got an analyst that literally thinks that we're spending too much money supporting Ukraine. They'll put another analyst with him that thinks that, the future of NATO is wrapped up in how the Ukraine-Russia war comes out. And they will try to balance that and get a decent analysis. And they will give facts, objective facts, as they know them to the consumer. It's not as tough for the intelligence community as it may seem,
okay,
because there's kind of a recipe for that, and it's kind of like peer-reviewed science. It's not perfect, but it's the best we've got because it's peer-reviewed.
Well, the model has launched us into superpower level, and I feel like those people at the top know we're at the top, and they know that if we're not at the top, then somebody else will become top dog. I've often heard leaders in the U.S. say things like, "So here's the deal, there's like Adam Kinzinger, for example, Representative Kinzinger.
I know who he is.
You probably know him personally. You probably played golf with him because you know everybody. But a guy like him, who I'm not a real big fan of these days, but he's wicked smart. I actually met him over at a friend's house at a cocktail party a couple of years ago, and he was fantastic. And he was telling me stories about being a helicopter pilot, and I was like, oh my gosh, this guy's amazing. Now I kind of have a different opinion, but a guy like that can walk into these bureaucracies because he's definitely for us supporting Ukraine, supporting Israel, like maintaining hegemony, like the world as the world's superpower. And there are people that say that, you brought up Ukraine, you brought up NATO. I feel like you're kind of a NATO expert, and we can probably touch on it if you want to. But a guy like that and guys that think like him are like, listen to me. All of these plebes, guys like me, okay, who am I? Not important enough to, no one's calling me from the government asking me my opinion. My opinion does not matter to them. And I understand that. But is there people at the top, these civil servants and these people at the top of government, do you think they are pretty much saying, listen, if we don't crush all of these other people, if we don't crush Russia, we don't crush Iran, we don't crush all of our enemies, we don't do that, somebody is going to dethrone us and take us off the throne, and they're going to be number one. So I'm sorry, all you anti-war libertarians. I'm sorry. Oh, you want us to be isolationist. Listen, we don't have a choice. We're going to be speaking, Arabic if you stop being such a sissy, Frank, and go fight. I hear things like, if you don't fight over there, fight them over here. Is there any truth to this idea that the reason I'm pretty much trying to steelman the case for fighting these wars, fighting these proxy wars? What are your thoughts on that?
All right. Let me fast forward about 60 years of my understanding of military history into a bit of a soundbite. The minute we dropped the atomic bombs on Japan, we had no choice. We had to be the world superpower. We literally had no choice because we had it, they didn't, everybody else was going to try and get it, so we had to be better at it. Fast forward to the most data I have is 2023, So the end of 2023, the biggest navy in the world, the most active boats in the world is not the United States of America anymore, it's China. And they are like mushrooms in the South China Sea. There's, as far as world hegemony, we're holding on to one thing that keeps us militarily superior, one thing and one thing only. We can launch a nuclear missile from a submarine. And so far as we know, they can't. That's it.
That's it?
That's it. So we need allies. And NATO is the oldest and strongest military alliance in the history of man. And it just got a lot stronger because we brought in Finland, which those guys are fighters and they have technology. But the idea of Russia marching through Ukraine and looking with their chops licked at Poland and a couple of other Baltic nations down farther south that's not very appetizing to the NATO members. And remember, Article 5 has only been invoked one time by us. We need help. And they were all there. Now, but please understand, I'm not making an argument for stupid wars. I admire everybody that served there, my brothers in Afghanistan, but everything but bombing the camps was just a stupid war. And Iraq too was even stupider. And I give Trump credit for calling that out. On the other hand, the idea that you can settle Ukraine by giving up ground that's a recipe for what I just described for Poland. How's Poland going to feel about that? Then they're the next to give up ground, and they're a NATO member.
Why are we assuming Putin is going to go into Poland?
He had Ukraine as part of the USSR. He had Poland as one of the satellites under the USSR. It's pretty clear he's doing nothing but trying to reconstitute the USSR. So he's going to go back to that playbook.
Yeah.
Serbia, Croatia, probably easy pickings.
What are your thoughts on, in 2014? Well, I mean, even going back to when, Putin is not a fan of Gorbachev because he feels like Gorbachev.
Oh, you think?
He's not. He doesn't like Gorbachev at all. And ever since Gorbachev kind of laid down for the Americans, I think Putin, this is probably back when Putin was in the KGB, I imagine. But I feel like, or that was probably way before because Putin's still pretty young.
No, he was Gorbachev's caddy. He knew when the opportunity was going to be there.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
He's a fantastic patient opportunist.
I mean, in 2014, help me with this. I feel like there was some type of deal struck between Russia and NATO, and which, by the way, whenever we say Russia and NATO, we really mean Russia and the United States. My lizard brain says that NATO and the U.S. is kind of the same thing. I understand like the pacts and the different doctrines from everything from Monroe Doctrine to NAFTA to NATO. I don't understand it like you do. I know that you have a better grasp of it than I do, but help me with this. There are some that kind of say, okay, I'm patriotic. I'm even probably a nationalist. Some can say that. I've heard good friends and writers say things like this. I want the United States to win. I want America first. I want America to execute in the way that preserves all of her interests first. And America might be the bad guy in this situation. Insofar as in 2014, when Putin started to give the warning. Is it true that the United States promised not to move any of the NATO forces an inch east of Berlin? Is that true?
I don't know that for a fact. I know that's what Russian scholars claim. You remember
and some American scholars.
In 1994, I believe it was, the USSR had been blown up for 3 years. And there was all these nuclear weapons sitting in Ukraine. All over Ukraine, there was nuclear weapons, well siloed, well guarded. no mission control, just nuclear weapons. And the United States, England, Russia, and I think Germany was involved as well. But of course, they had no expedition force at that time. And we all said, Ukraine, you give up your nukes. You can give them to Russia. It's okay, you can give them to Russia. But in exchange for that, if anybody attacks you, all four of us will protect you. I think it was in 1994 that treaty was signed. So what happened? They gave up their nukes, and Russia invaded them twice.
Well, it'll be really interesting to see what happens with the election. And I've got a lot of concern over the next couple months, couple years. I think as a person gets older, man or woman, whoever you are, as you get older and older and older, time starts going by faster, and you start to care more about your community, generally speaking. At least the good ones do, right? Start to care more about the world. Start to become more concerned. Look at the youth. I've got 3 kids. I mean, I'm not the only person with kids. I'm not special. A lot of people have kids. We got to make sure that people.
But that's your most important job.
It's the most important job, and I used to think that was such a platitude when I was younger. But people, it's not.
It's not.
It's not. It's the number one thing.
And
There's nothing more important. Yeah, please tell me.
It never changes.
Even when they get older, right?
They can be emancipated, but you're still parenting them.
All the way up until. Did you ever see that? It's not Judge Judy, but there's a judge. I don't know. I apologize. I don't know the name of the TV show, but there's an older gentleman. I think he's in his early 90s. He's 92 years old, and he's in court, and he's fighting parking tickets. And the judge says, "Why are you getting all of these parking tickets?" And the 92-year-old man says, "Because I have to take my son to the doctor." And the judge goes, "Your son? You're taking your son to the doctor?" And the 92-year-old man says, "Yes." The judge goes, "Okay, well, what's the deal?" He's like, "Well, my son is 67 years old, and he has cancer. My boy has cancer, and he can't take care of himself, and I have to take care of him." So this is a real viral clip that you can find.
Is this a judge from Rhode Island?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I haven't seen this one, but that very compassionate guy.
The very compassionate judge.
Yeah, yes.
He kind of speaks like he's got that Rhode Island or Jersey kind of like Italian kind of flair to him.
Very strong East Coast inflection. Yeah.
Totally. Yes, East Coast. And he goes, "Well, you know what? I'm going to absolve you from all of your parking tickets. We have this fund that we kind of have put together from people who donate." But the point is, the 92-year-old man is taking his almost near 70-year-old son to the doctor because he has cancer. Because like you had intuited that parenting never stops.
Yeah.
So when are you going to come on the pod next, Tony?
Just text me. You got my phone number. I'll be here.
Well, yeah, I hate to cut things short, but when I look at the time, I look at everybody's schedules. I know you got to go, and I know we all have things to do. I would normally, I think you and I would just talk for 2 or 3 more hours. That's it.
That would be fun, but we got more topics for later. That'd be
We have
great.
so many more. Thank you so much for coming on.
Very much my pleasure.
Thank you.